Lore Together is proud to be part of the Boss Rush Games Network. Feel free to find out more at bossrushgames.com/network. Hi, I'm Sapphy.
And I'm Mystic.
And this is Lore Together. This is the podcast where husband and wife team go over all the storytelling, world building, and characters of video games because it's what we like to do together. We lore together.
Yep, and this is episode 142.
I totally forgot to drink a cup of water before I talked to the mic, and now I'm like, oh no, do I have dry mouth? So let me chug that while Mystic is doing these little alerts he does at the beginning of every show.
Yes, amazing segue there, Sapphy. Before we get into the episode, if you'd like to contact us, you can do that many different ways. Instagram, Blue Sky, Mastodon, Reddit, YouTube, Steam, and Discord in the description down below. Or you can contact us via email at loretogether@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the podcast, and we hope you do, there's 2 ways we can do that. Soon to be 3.
Yeah.
But right now, just 2. First is thumbs up, 5 stars, whatever it is, wherever you're listening, we appreciate it. The other way is through Patreon at patreon.com/loretogether, where you can pay a per episode pledge to get early access to the podcast episodes, as well as exclusive access to some Let's Plays, which will hopefully be returning soon. Exclusive access to my blind Let's Plays, which I do have a few lined up, including we posted the one for Pacific Drive, which had more runtime before it crashed than our live stream.
Oh, that was such a sad state of affairs.
As well as the forthcoming audiobook that Sapphy will be reading for Primal Rage.
The Avatars.
And you also get access to Sapphy's EPUB version of her first novel, Mother Revolution.
Yes, the story about a single mother who is trying to get back home to Earth and realizes there's a whole subjugated race of people she may want to help before she does that. So, if that sounds intriguing to you, and you also like books with cute babies and ornery bounty hunters, give it a try. It's been called Smart, Fast-Paced, and Nuanced Sci-Fi. I'm going to be writing that...
And not by me, because I haven't read it yet.
Oh, gosh, you're so bogus, Mystic! It's fine. But yeah, I saw that in the review. Smart, Fast-Paced, and Nuanced. And I was like, that is going to be my tagline for everything now. Speaking of smart, fast-paced, and nuanced, that's going to be what this episode is, because I wrote it, guys. I have the script.
I have no idea what it's about, Sapphy.
Do you want to guess?
Give me something to work with, at least.
Okay, it's not a series I've covered yet.
That is...
But I have a very limited range of ones that we've agreed over the past 4 to 5 years that I'm going to cover. So there's that. It came out in 2007.
2007, jeez. Okay, so before we met.
Yes, right before, pretty much.
Oh my god, I have no idea. My mind is drawing a blank on just the year
It was
alone.
the first in its series.
Primarily console or PC?
Console at the time, mostly Xbox, then became more of a PC thing. Once Xbox let that stuff come over there. American market first, then Europe. It's wouldn't necessarily call it first person shooter, but first person adventure RPG. Not like hardcore RPG, but it has RPG elements, I should say.
There's like 5 different games that are running through my head.
So then I'm going to start
I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to run through one of them. Gears of War? No. That came out right before this, actually. So I'm going to start with a question for you, Mystic. Is a man not entitled oh my God.
to the sweat of his brow?
Okay, so we're doing BioShock. All right.
So the trippy thing, guys, is like 3 to 4 days ago. Mystic and I are just talking. He's coming in while I'm working during the day, and he's picking up something. And there's some question. We were joking about how we asked a question, and before he leaves the room, he just starts with that line. Is a man not entitled? I was like, oh no, does he know? Oh God, has he been looking at my search history? No, I don't remember why that was. It was particularly hot that day too.
So
Yes, I mean we're in Chicago and it's particularly hot. So this first line of a very infamous speech is like a almost like formative memory for gamers of a certain era. In a time when we were constantly being offered clones of Call of Duty and Gears of War, BioShock offered something more thoughtful with the true discussion of the nature of man in an action-adventure format. It's possibly also why in Left 4 Dead you get Francis commenting, "I hate Ayn Rand," in the airport level.
Really?
So Left 4 Dead came out in 2008, and there is a very specific part in one of the levels. You go to an airport, and you see the Atlas
I remember
figure.
Francis's comment, but Ayn Rand and Andrew Ryan, like...
Oh, get ready.
Oh, no, we getting political.
BioShock and its antagonist, Andrew Ryan, had brought back objectivism to modern discussions outside of stuffy academics and Alan Greenspan's inner circle. But what is the story that brought Andrew Ryan to the controversial philosophical outlook? And in turn, how did that lead to the success and downfall of his projects, including the underwater playground of Rapture? That is the subject of today's episode. We'll look at Andrew Ryan's life, the historical context, his outlook on the world, and how that brings us to the beginning of a game series with a compelling story people still talk about today.
I should have known, honestly, how this was going to go the second I said BioShock, because I run through most of the time, not all the time, but generally I am telling you the story of a game and some deep dives into the world of the game.
You're more interested in like the narrative of it all. Yeah.
And Sapphy's like, we're going to do analysis.
Well, I think it's really important to note that this game is trying to say things about specific philosophies.
Right.
And also the series overall tends to talk about essentially the idea of there's no true good philosophy. There are only people who apply it well. And
okay. I know nothing about... So I know that there's BioShock 1.
There's BioShock.
And 2, which is also like with the big guys with the drills and stuff. Like
yeah,
that's on the box
I think there were...
I know there's Infinite, which is up in the clouds. And
yes.
I don't know if there's anything beyond that, but I know nothing about 2 or Infinite. So.
Yeah. So... here we go. We're going to stick with basically Andrew Ryan's story. And we don't have the exact date that he was born, but we do know he was born to a Jewish family in Minsk sometime right after the turn of the century, when the city was part of the Russian Empire. Minsk, and excuse me if I'm saying it wrong, there's a little bit of a nuance with the vowel. Minsk is one of the many places in Eastern Europe which has been associated with multiple nation states in its long existence. And for the early life of young Andrei Ryanovsky, he was a witness to how violent these changes can be.
Okay. So he ended up Americanizing his name, too. Okay. That tracks for the time period.
Yeah. Quickly going over the complex evolution of the fall of the Russian Empire, we have to start with the philosophy that started it all, Leninism. Stay with me here. We'll get back to the path to Rapture soon enough. Before we can get there, we must get to what started an angst within young Andrei. Full disclosure, this is a brief summation of the pivotal point of Russian history to give context to the life of a fictional antagonist. I'm not claiming you'll gain anywhere close to the nuance necessary to understand Marxism, Leninism, and the actions taken to make the Russian Revolution a success for the Bolsheviks. But let's gain some context anyway.
I was going to say, that one topic is probably a course.
You could probably have
or even maybe people's PhD.
A years-long podcast discourse could be about essentially the events that led to the Russian Revolution and the formation of Lenin's Russian government.
All right, so here's the broad strokes of the broad strokes of the broad strokes.
Yeah, this is a wide brush, guys. We're not going to be getting anywhere near the details whatsoever, but at least a little bit so that you know why it's relevant to BioShock in particular. Many of us know who Vladimir Lenin is, but we don't know how he became so revered. I should say, at least in America. Lenin was a Marxist revolutionary who felt that the working class, also called the proletariat, would never advance within a society structured by capitalism. And Russia was pretty much a feudal capitalist state at this time, with the Russian Tsar in place. The system is designed to keep fights to petty circumstances like wages and the ability to rest. Through his written work, including the pamphlet What Is to Be Done, published in 1901, Lenin popularized the idea of professional revolutionaries organizing to help bring class consciousness to the proletariat. To quote Lenin, "Class political consciousness can be brought to the workers only from without. That is, only from outside the economic struggle, from outside the sphere of relations between workers and employers." Leninism led to a split in the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party into two groups: the moderate Mensheviks, who believed in a broad structure of organizing their politics in a slower progression towards their ideals, and the radical Bolsheviks, who began to mobilize these smaller groups of professional revolutionaries. Mystic is like searching for something to say right now and is like absolutely flabbergasted.
It's history, so I don't have much to comment on. So
yeah, okay. You know I would though, so it's like I'm surprised.
I don't know this part of history that well.
That's fair.
So
that's fair.
Yeah.
The one of the funny things about studying theater in college is that I learned a little bit about it from that. So, but just a little bit, just a very tiny amount.
Everything I know about the Russian system and everything I learned from James Bond. So.
Oh, that's not a good source.
No.
Okay. Fair enough.
In that I heard names that you have said from there.
Okay.
That's about it.
Okay. By 1917, the Bolsheviks had grown in number, and by October of that year, overthrew the government. Many working class people left their jobs to become part of the Red Guard, what became the transitional military force due to the collapsing Imperial Russian Army. Organized all over Russia, there were local military groups with varying expertise. All had the same loyalty to the new government that Lenin was leading, and some took that loyalty to extremes. During this time, Andrei Ryanovsky watched the Red Guard execute his father's cousin and that cousin's wife for the crime of associating with his communist-opposing father. So, essentially, Andrei's... I don't even know how you say the cousin relation, but essentially Andrei's father's cousin and cousin-in-law were executed merely for associating with Andrei's father. Soon after, Andrei fled to Constantinople with his father, leaving behind a family business destroyed by the Bolsheviks. By 1919, Andrei made it to America and anglicized his name to Andrew Ryan.
All right.
Which, for those of you who don't know, that happened frequently in America.
It still does a little bit.
Not as frequently.
Not as frequently. No, definitely not as frequently. Part of it also, like, actors would pick names because I don't know how it is now, but for a while, like, if you were starting to get famous, you didn't mix. If you had a similar name, you change your name.
Well, that's nowhere near as the same thing as like the Ellis Island and other immigration ports.
I'm not trying to say that, but like a lot of actors would pick very Anglicanized names,
or were given or forced to have. I mean, the story of Rita Hayworth is horrible, and
so if you are trying to be if you're trying to distance yourself or try to make yourself more American, quote unquote. Yeah, it's a thing that happens. It's a thing that still happens, and it's a thing that some people chose to do and some people had forced on them.
Right. So. Exactly. This experience of fleeing Russia made Ryan bitter. In his mind, those who had succeeded due to their own intelligence and hard work were being punished because those who hadn't wanted more. America was a chance to make it right. America was the place where his own efforts and clever thinking would be rewarded instead of undermined. For a while, Ryan was able to do so. The land that he had purchased, luckily, had a decent amount of oil underneath it, and Ryan used the money earned in that enterprise to invest in others. He became one of the wealthiest men in America, owning Ryan Oil, a large chunk of America's coal production, and the second largest railroad in the country. Ryan's disillusion with America's opportunities started in the 1930s after his wealth was well established. As an American who went through a decent school system, it seems silly to have to explain the New Deal, but we have to in order to explain Andrew's angst.
Right.
Which I feel like is this whole story. This whole episode is explaining Andrew Ryan's angst. The New Deal was started in response to the Great Depression. The Great Depression started in October of 1929 when the New York Stock Exchange experienced a monumental drop in the total values of stocks and options, which confirmed looming concerns of the sustainability of American markets. This had been brewing for months.
Yes.
And people outside of America who invested in American markets saw it coming. And essentially October of 1929 is when they started selling everything at such a rapid pace that the value of the dollar just crashed.
I'm sure this is also a full class in school.
This is also a full class in school. You could study this also. This could be a whole podcast once again. Like it's a whole 3 to 5 year podcast situation. This translated to most working class people being hit. In particular, farmers, many of whom were experiencing droughts in an area called the Dust Bowl. So conveniently, Mother Nature decided to make this worse by putting a large area. Now, granted, there's also some discussion of some bad farming practices because there wasn't really a good rotating crop structure at that time. It's just plant the same thing over and over again. The erosion and everything became so bad that there were places that used to be very fertile farmland for the American standard then that just dried up. So farmers not only were first before in like the late 20s were already overproducing their stuff, but now they had nothing to produce and they couldn't pay their mortgages and it was bad.
Yeah, crop rotation is extremely important. Otherwise you nullify the soil.
Yes.
And then your soil just goes away.
And to not even just focus on the farmers, at the same time, working class, mostly men, because men were the ones that were working at the time. But of course, a lot of working class families had both parents working still. And it was a 25% unemployment rate. So 1 in 4 people who wanted to work to support their families could not find a job.
Right.
It was incredibly devastating. The president at the time, Herbert Hoover, basically told people to get good.
Yeah. He
thought that relief to those unemployed should only come from charities and not from the state.
I do want to say I agree with Herbert Hoover.
Okay. No, I don't think anybody. Yeah. No, it was literally, he was just like, you got to get good. Charities were unable to keep up with the need, putting pressure on Hoover. And he barely bowed to it that was
kind of his thing was, charity will help people. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah. He honestly just
go
left
talk
it.
To charities.
He just, and I work for a nonprofit, and just the idea that the state would be like, oh, we're not supporting you. You're just going to have to figure it out with private investment. Like, that's impossible. It's just, it's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. This led to him having every new sign of poverty named after him early on in the crisis, including calling the cardboard used to cover holes in people's shoes Hoover leather. So,
really? Okay.
Yes, that was literally because most shoes were leather then, and if you couldn't afford to repair or replace your shoes, the best thing you could do was wet some cardboard, put it in there, and hope for the best. And that was called Hoover leather.
I knew about Hoovervilles and
yes, Hoovervilles.
So.
Yeah, Hoovervilles were the slums that were built up out ramshackles across the United States. Hoover lost his re-election bid in 1932 to Franklin Delano Roosevelt in his first of what would become 5 terms of president, which will hopefully never happen ever again in the history of the United States. FDR implemented the New Deal. These were large-scale social supports and poverty relief programs on the federal level, supported carefully with targeted executive orders. Many of these programs used federal funds for large-scale projects at the state level, like electricity generation by the Tennessee Valley Authority. Others created national safety nets, including Social Security, the guarantee of some income to prevent poverty for the elderly, which was incredibly incredibly significant back then. The idea that you could at 65 or 67 just stop working and at least have a little bit of income. People were finally able to pay rent and live comfortably in their old age.
Right.
So Andrew Ryan saw the New Deal as FDR and his ilk spoon-feeding Americans the same Bolshevik poison that had doomed him before, calling those not of his status or outlook parasites. He literally burned down a whole forest he had purchased in order to avoid the government seizing it as parkland. It angered him.
So national parks are like one of the best things we've ever come up with.
National parks are lauded across the world. I don't think the thing is, when you live in America, you do not understand how amazing it is for us to have places that are just nature for us to enjoy and learn from and have peace and solitude. We take it for granted because we don't understand in comparison to other places like, Europe in particular. The forest is like, they have national parks, but it's not as expansive or it's not as open. It's just a little different. And you see a lot of open space in forests, but it's not tended to in the public space in the same way in a lot of the world. Or in other places, like in parts of South America right now, it's just profit driven, and there's the reverence for that nature to be maintained is not there. Right. So
I just kind of want to see someone try to develop Yellowstone because
they're gonna waste their money on it if they can.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Logistics in there would be a nightmare. No matter what you try.
Getting back to Ryan's land, it angered him to think Congress would move to make the land public. And I quote, "The rabble could stand slack-jawed under the canopy and pretend it was paradise earned." His detest for the common man taking any of his money was palpable. Even when you think you'd agree with Ryan on something, it's not for the same reason. You don't get there for the same reason that he does. He abhorred the Hiroshima bombing because it meant the parasites now had a tool to get whatever they wanted. If he had such power, of course he would have earned it. But no, the U.S. held this power, which meant that it would benefit those not at Ryan's level. This contempt was what initiated Andrew Ryan to found a city away from everything aligned with the ideas of objectivism. The philosophy was first popularized by author Ayn Rand in her book The Fountainhead, published in 1943. Objectivism, to summarize so you don't have to suffer through what I did in my philosophy class 20 years ago, starts with the concept of three axioms, or three undeniable truths: existence, consciousness, and identity. From there, one is meant to gain reason through their perception of reality through their consciousness. Those aren't the parts that get people riled up. Once you get to its ethics, objectivism argues that rational thought that sustains one's own well-being is the most ethical path. The oath stated by the Atlas Shrugged character John Galt summarizes this rational egoism very well. "I swear by my life and my love of it that I will never live for the sake of another man, nor ask another man to live for mine." It's an audio medium, and Mystic is shaking his head. I do not mean to render you speechless, because that kind of ruins the format of the show.
I hardly disagree with this viewpoint. I don't know what else to say.
One of the biggest critiques of objectivism and its rational egoism is the fact that this philosophy is an easy way for those already in power to justify maintaining power outside of any other need for those around them. It's a line of thought used by many educated people who believe themselves to be the smartest person in the room. If you're a rational person and you rationally support yourself in one way, no one else should deny you any path to support yourself. To do so is violence. This is the philosophy that Andrew Ryan fell into, whether purposefully or not, when he decided to build Rapture.
So to rationalize something is to logic your way into it.
Yes.
You can logic your way into anything because your logic is not an objective truth.
But if your logic is based on existence, consciousness, and identity, then it is a truth, Mystic.
I don't like this.
I don't like this either. I don't like this either. So, I referenced Alan Greenspan before. There was a lot of this laissez-faire management of the capitalist systems around the 90s and up to through the early aughts. And because it's the idea of there's nothing wrong with letting people who are good at making money continue to make money. They justify it rationally being like, well, because they have so much money, they're going to spend it, right? And then that money will be spent to give jobs and services to other people, and therefore they will help maintain the economy.
Yeah, most people are not that altruistic.
What studies were showing, even when I was an economics major almost 20 years ago now, actually about 20, I started my college career about 20 years ago. What they found in studies is that actually what happens is when people who are that wealthy have that much money, they save it. They put it all in savings, therefore making it essentially dead to the economy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
You give me $600, I'm spending it.
But you give Jeff Bezos $600,
and it goes into a coffer somewhere
until he needs it on a rainy day, when he has to buy the moon or something.
Right.
The dream of building a city at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean was in order to create a place where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small.
I'm sorry. We have so much, earliest science fiction books that most people would do. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is literally scientists not bound by morality. Maybe no,
and apparently we still aren't learning this lesson. It's still an issue, but it keeps coming back again and again.
It's
and
all
again.
the guys who watch the TV show, the fake TV show, The Death Spiral, and they're like, "Look, we learned how to make the Death Spiral. Isn't this great?" And it's like, no, you got the wrong message from the stupid show.
No. Wait. The whole the story was titled "Do not build the Death Spiral." What? Okay, so this city was going to be a place where one would not live for the sake of another man, but for their own personal pursuits.
I don't know if I want to live in a city like that.
Yeah, I'm such a hippie at these days. I couldn't do it. Once construction was done in 1946, Ryan invited who he deemed to be the world's most brilliant individuals to enjoy the freedom that no nation above water could give. No regulations, no redistribution of wealth, no parasites to feed.
So 10,000 egos in a room.
Indeed, some very intelligent and entrepreneurial people did come, and the first decade was full of economic prosperity and political stability. Those of means maintained certain sections and features of Rapture, including amusement parks, hospitals, and charities for anyone that found themselves destitute at the bottom of the ocean.
Now, is there any discussion about how they even built this?
So there is literally a BioShock book called Rapture that kind of goes into that.
Okay.
But
that's not what this episode's about.
No, this episode was not going to cover that. Ryan enjoyed his newfound power of being the biggest fish in his own small pond.
I've created my own fish tank.
Yes. He ensured no word of Rapture ever went up to the surface, his only law forbidding unauthorized contact. He grew his city by curating the kind of talent he wanted to see: famed artists, savvy businessmen, and accomplished scientists.
Ooh, found a flaw already in this whole idea. I mean, more than one. But if you're already talking about fearing the censor and then you have the phrase authorized communications, you're already contradicting yourself.
He even coaxed a former Broadway chorus girl, Jasmine Jolene, to join him. Jolene became a famous stripper at the Eve's Garden venue and would later become Ryan's lover, although not his only one. He also gained access to technology for only him, having a personal revival system and bathyspheres that allowed one out of Rapture only if they carried Ryan's genetic code.
Okay, so we've gone from I am creating the ultimate city to I am creating a cult of personality.
It kind of almost, I feel, in times of history where this happens, it's one and the same.
Yeah.
It always constantly reminds me of when I first read the poem Ozymandias. Look at ye works, mighty and despair. And do you remember, Mystic, where those works are in the poem?
No.
In ruins covered in sand.
Fair enough.
The problem with any place as secluded as Rapture is that black markets thrive under these conditions.
Isolated areas, yeah.
Ryan didn't worry about Frank Fontaine's business practices, even when his peers warned him about it. Coming in as a fishing mogul to Rapture in 1948, Fontaine soon was looped into a research opportunity that would develop what was called Adam. This substance from sea slugs could be used to alter one's genetic code and offer amazing powers. Perfect product for Fontaine to sell and help cover up his smuggling enterprise, now starting a new company called Fontaine Futuristics. He actually started as a fishing mogul, bringing in fish to eat, because you can't really, easily fish from inside a fish tank.
Yeah, I was going to say, how does the fishing even work?
So basically Fontaine was like, what if we got somebody to make me some drones and I could bring in fish that way? And
like a submersible that just goes and gets fish?
Yeah, and Andrew Ryan was like, sure. I mean, that's like the general gist of it. I don't know all the details. I probably skated over something.
Fair enough.
And from there, Fontaine built up wealth. He got other projects, including Fontaine Futuristics. Ryan defended Fontaine from those who didn't like how his support of the poor grew his influence to be larger than Ryan's.
What poor? Everyone here is supposed to be... I just got to look over the microphone.
And Ryan had no qualms with how Fontaine ran business, even when it meant scarred and addicted customers due to his plasmids. It was only when Ryan found out Fontaine was smuggling products into Rapture and breaking its sole law that the underwater oligarch decided to do something about it. Ryan broke up the smuggling ring and even made smuggling a crime punishable by death. And he was able to break it up pretty well. By the mid-1950s, Fontaine was elusive, yet still held a significant hold of Rapture's politics, and invading that one law, keeping what little remained of his black market running. At the same time, a different kind of dissent was growing like a weed in Rapture, the weed of altruism. Sophia Lamb had been invited as a psychiatrist to help serve the behavioral health needs of those in Rapture. Tired of what horrid things she'd seen after working in Hiroshima after the bombing.
Oh, jeez.
She delighted at the chance. However, seeing the inevitable class stratification cause people to suffer at all levels of Rapture, she preached abandonment of the self, saying, "Utopia cannot precede the utopian. It will exist the moment we are fit to occupy it. Not a place, but a people." Ryan at first arranged public debates with Lamb, believing her philosophy would be easily bested by his own. Instead, she gained a following that became a religious doctrine.
This is not going to end well for anybody.
No. As her following became too great, Ryan had Lamb imprisoned after spying on her in order to find her guilty of any crime. He actually hired a reporter to say, find something she's doing illegal so I can lock her up. And
there's only two laws.
What happens a lot in this system is that the people who are considered the smartest men or women in the room find ways to admonish each other in the court of elitist public opinion and then get locked up. That seems to be what happens in Rapture. Lamb would find a way out in time, but that is a story for when we cover BioShock 2.
Oh, spoilers for me, I guess.
Yeah. In 1956, Ryan was confronted with what he considered to be an unforgivable betrayal. Jasmine Jolene had become pregnant with his child, but wanted to become more financially independent from Ryan. Also, things weren't going great, so she needed the money anyway. So she sold the embryo to a scientist who worked with Fontaine Futuristics, ultimately handing over the embryo to Fontaine.
I have theories in my head now because I know nothing about BioShock.
Those of you who know BioShock are like, oh yeah, we knew this was coming. Once Ryan found out, he murdered Jolene, knowing that this child would be used against him. After almost 2 years of putting all his efforts towards besting Fontaine, Ryan finally did. Frank Fontaine was reported dead in a shootout, stopping his smuggling operation. Many of Rapture's elite were happy that the thug was gone. I mean, people had already not liked his tactics to begin with. Mm-hmm. But, you know, this whole, like, evading Ryan and disrespecting the utopia he was making was just getting to be too much. So
utopia.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. Then Andrew Ryan did the first step toward becoming what he hated. He nationalized Fontaine Futuristics.
Okay. Didn't see that coming, but okay.
It was getting to be dangerous to have his influence out there unmitigated. Okay. Ryan was losing hold of Rapture that way, and the only way he could see out is making it Ryan Futuristics, therefore a company of the state. Many who had been courted with Ryan's celebration of objectivism under the sea now recoiled at his decisions. One close friend of Ryan even resigning from politics entirely. They had a whole council, and this guy said, "I'm out. This is no longer what I thought it was going to be.
This is as far as I can see this going. I don't want to go any further in this direction."
Yeah. 2 months later, the approximately 100 people that were associated with Fontaine's crimes, his smuggling, and also just his undermining of Ryan, were put in the Fontaine department store and jailed there. Almost all of them modified to fight with the Atom products produced by Fontaine Futuristics. It was kind of almost like he had an army of these addicts.
Are these the... You know, I vaguely remember watching, I think you play BioShock. Are these the splicers?
Well, we're not quite to that point yet, but it is essentially the Atom and the plasmids made the splicers, and there's one more step before we kind of get to what you saw in the game.
Okay. And I'll see it again apparently soon. Mm-hmm.
After all these people were jailed in Fontaine's department store, more Rapture citizens were rattled, finding the libertarian utopia was becoming more like a dictatorship. Meanwhile, Ryan gained a new political adversary, Atlas. A fisherman who saw an opportunity toward reform, Atlas recruited citizens of Rapture to oppose Ryan's rule. Assembling very similarly to the Bolsheviks Ryan had escaped, Atlas and his followers gathered up weapons and Atom products like the plasmids and gene tonics, preparing for what they felt to be an inevitable confrontation.
Wait, so both his major political rivals are fishermen?
No comment.
Okay.
Understanding the looming threat, Ryan at first imprisoned Atlas in the same department store as Fontaine's criminal associates. This backfired, with Atlas using his charisma to rally the prisoners to his side. Ryan sent his forces to take Atlas and any of his allies out in the prison. Instead, a number of prisoners escaped along with Atlas. On New Year's Eve of 1958, Rapture's civil war started. Atlas's revolutionaries attacked a masquerade ball being held for the elite at the Kashmir restaurant. Instead of pursuing peace, Ryan continued the guerrilla war that ensued, seeing it as an infestation of the parasites. Literally, well, if they're going to fight with plasmids, you who fight for me, you fight with plasmids too. So...
There's no way this ends well.
He believed that any compromise with Atlas would bring down the entire city. What followed was a genetic arms race, with more combat-specific plasmids and gene tonics being developed and sold. Weapons were developed to counter these measures, escalating conflict and alienating Ryan from more and more of his peers. After surviving 3 assassination attempts and seeing his city in ruins, P.S., he's the kind of guy that you came to assassinate him, and then he hung your body outside of his office door as a warning.
Oh, jeez.
So we're getting medieval in here right now. A scientist working for Ryan suggested a way to win the war. A pheromone could be dispersed across the city to make the people who took commercial plasmids highly susceptible to mental suggestion.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this is going to go.
This was the final nail in the coffin for Ryan's city, an elimination of free will in order to maintain it.
Who's free will at this point?
Yeah. For Ryan, succumbing to Atlas's rebellion would mean that Ryan's supporters would be enslaved anyway.
I'm doing them a favor.
He chose to disperse the pheromone, causing even more chaos and disarray in Rapture. In theory, Ryan was winning the war, but heading down to Rapture at the beginning of BioShock. What exactly is he winning?
At this point, it's pride.
BioShock then becomes the end of Andrew Ryan's story. Because a man chooses, a slave obeys. But that last piece of his story is for those who want to either play the game or watch a long play of it. It's better to experience these twists with fresh eyes. Instead, I leave you with the story of how a man created his own hell before he was buried at sea. And also, very specifically, historical context of how he got there.
Right. Jeez. It's been a while since we have gotten political.
Getting political. Yes, it's been a while. Or has it really? I feel like a lot of the stuff we cover has political connotations anyway.
But not to... Usually we're not crossing the T's and dotting the I's as much. It's more as a background, like unoppressed people, or even in Firmament we have some political aspects of the stratification when we covered it between the people running the quote experiment and then the people who are living it without knowing it.
Yeah.
The extreme subjugation for the sake of one person's ego is mind-blowing.
Yep. And the justification, the way you justify getting there after all of that time.
Right, because you can literally rationalize anything to yourself. Because
absolutely,
you're basically arguing with your own mind. So you'll twist the logic to make yourself win.
And here's Andrew Ryan, who follows this philosophy that essentially says, as long as I'm conscious, and I'm trying to go back to those 3 pillars of objectivism. So essentially, as long as I exist and I confirm my existence, I am conscious and I have an identity. I can now perceive reality, so I can make any logical and rational conclusion I want without extrapolating too much. And
this implies you share reality but with nobody. You are not in a single player game.
When I wrote an essay for a test in philosophy, to counter it. Actually, it wasn't a final, it was a paper. He was talking about what was the superior ethics path. And my argument against objectivism is you should not have a moral code or an ethical code that can survive in a complete and utter vacuum. When there is no conflict necessary to sustain your ethical code, you don't have an ethical code. An ethical code has to inherently involve you interacting with other people in a substantive way inherently. It is about managing conflict. And if your ethical code, quote unquote, can survive without that conflict, or assumes that conflict will not be pursued when you pursue your own self-interest, it's not a good ethical code. It's just not. It doesn't, so that's always been and I'm sure there's if people who are specialists in objectivism probably could argue against that, but I'm with you. It makes it seem like everybody's perceiving the same thing.
You can't even get people to agree on pizza toppings.
You can't even get people to agree on the color of a dress in a picture on the internet.
No, which I think is what blew people's minds is, there is this much subjectivity in reality. That we
literally
can look at a picture.
We can't even... Okay, one of the most crazy things in that philosophy class that I realized, we cannot confirm that color is consistent with everybody.
Yeah.
That the way I see green is the same way that Mystic sees green, is the same way little Buddy sees green, is the same way that my mother and father see it. You can't confirm that. It is a completely subjective experience. We might all be saying our favorite color is the same color because the way that we perceive it looks right to everybody else. It's kind of like how when you read ancient...
Well, yeah. Every time you say, I like green, anything you can point to that is green is going to be that color.
Yes.
Doesn't mean that green doesn't mean that everyone sees that as green as you see it.
Yes.
If somebody else sees it and it looks the way you would think red looks,
yes.
you have no way of proving one way or another.
Right. You can't prove it.
This is like, I'm 14 and this is deep, but yeah.
No. Yeah. It actually causes offshoots, a theoretical thought of what color is,
right.
What defines color. It's insane. So if we have philosophy about how color exists and if it's an inherent thing in the universe, you can't tell me that existence, consciousness, and identity are the 3 pillars necessary to have logical, rational thought about how you need to navigate the world and survive by yourself. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. So now,
also, what's the old saying? Mm-hmm. Life is other people.
I've not heard that one before, but that could be true. Anyway, so what did you think, Mystic, overall?
I think I like Andrew Ryan about as much as you like Ted Farrow.
Oh, no. I think I hate Ted Farrow much more than you could ever hate Andrew Ryan.
Fair. That is fair, actually, because Sapphy has literally brought up Ted Farrow as... I think you've screened his name in epithet once, just being like, yes. Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. Something happened, and it just made me so enraged at the world, and I just cursed and go, Ted Farrow! Like, I could not stand it.
So, okay, not as much as you hate Ted Farrow, yes. But I definitely do not like Andrew Ryan and his philosophy, which I think is fair. The little I do know of BioShock is he's never shown to be a great person.
He wanted to be great. He thought himself great, and he thought, again, Ozymandias, like, all over. It's definitely, dare I say, to make it very simplistic, it's definitely getting high off your own farts. Like, it's just...
I think that's a great place to leave this thing.
No. And the one thing I will note right now for those who've played BioShock and are like, but Sapphy, you should have mentioned this, that, and the other thing. I'm keeping it intentionally blank because with the way that I cover these things, we'll slowly start revealing BioShock's stories when we go back to it over the next however many years about it. So we haven't covered BioShock, the first BioShock plot. We're not actually covering the answers to how is Atlas going to win this war,
right?
Or, what happened to the embryo. But those of you who are fans know exactly what's happening there, and I thought that you would appreciate the fact we could tell the story without spoiling it. So if you want to share this with friends to convince them, I know this game's almost 20 years old, but you still got to play it. Like, please.
Yeah, I just know the big guys with the drills and...
Big daddies. Yeah. Big daddies and little sisters, which was... There was a whole like army building bonding effort, which we could get into the science, the quote unquote science of atom plasmids and then how they were used in the war for another topic, another day. But that's another one I'd probably want to do.
Okay.
Yeah, but BioShock, man. And more importantly, what did I put this in my notes? Andrew Ryan, Objectivism, and the Failed Dream of Rapture.
All right. I'll be diving into BioShock then.
So for those of you who know about our live streams, know that the Thursday after this airs to the public, Mystic is going to be diving into Rapture as Jack, the protagonist who crashes his plane and lands in the sea and finds a lighthouse.
Don't spoil this for me. I have seen the opening when you played it, but yeah.
Well, and of course you do because you knew the quote from the beginning of the episode.
I mean, I think I watched you play for a little bit, but that opening cutscene is amazing.
It's so good. It's so well done. It's well written. The thing I also like about this is even when you talk about Sophia Lamb and her altruism, in the end, none of these philosophies are perfect. And they stay with that concept throughout the whole series.
I mean, let's be honest. No philosophy is ever going to be perfect because people aren't perfect.
Right. And therein lies the truth of it.
Yeah.
But people who cling to these ideas too fiercely become the villains in their own stories.
Yeah. Reality is usually very kind of in the middle.
time is a weird soup,
Yes.
as they like to say. So, live stream the Thursday after this airs to the public. Mystic will be going into BioShock. And then alternate Thursdays, we're still doing Mass Effect 2.
Yep. Assuming it runs this time. Yeah, somebody jumped in and was like, this is an interesting update to Mass Effect 2 because we had to play Papers, Please. Like, we could Our
not...
chat voted for Papers, Please because Mass Effect 2 just would
not
run.
work. So, it's working now. We've checked it.
Now that you said it, though.
I know. Well, we'll see. I mean, chat gets to vote on a lot of stuff for Mass Effect 2. So join us in the chat to vote for that. Patrons get double voting privilege.
Yep. Thank you guys for listening.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.